Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see folks rolling in. Hi, Tom. Hi, Paula, Becky, Selena, Earl. It's great to have you all. All right, I have a fun opener. You're welcome to give me feedback on it if you don't think it's fun, but I think it's pretty tested. You may have done this before. And we'll just have time for a couple people who feel like they want to share, but also feel free to use the chat. And so the opening question is about the story of your name. And you're welcome to use, talk about someone else in your family's name. It doesn't have to be you, it could be your grand someone. And I have so many, I love this one, so I have lots of things I would want to say. But I am going to choose someone from my husband's family. He has someone in his family, and it's spelled his first name is spelled Aenus. And oh, sorry, I was going to do a different. Oh, I'll do it in a second. Aenus, and so he pronounces it differently. I say it's anus, or and he says I say Enos. But anyways, he developed a whiskey still called and they call it the coffee whiskey still a long, long time ago in Ireland. And now there's all this great Japanese whiskey that uses the coffee whiskey still. And so you'll go into a bar and you'll see coffee all over. So he's a little bit famous. He gets very excited about it. It gives him a reason to talk to people, which he doesn't need much of. Anyone else want to share the story of your name?
I'll go. I'm going to break the
Thanks, Tom.
silence. So I have a
Thanks.
son named Kailash, which is
Oh,
it's a name from India, and it's also a sacred mountain in Tibet. It's the legendary diamond-like abode of the Indian god Shiva. And there's a very famous legend called the Ramayana that most people from India know. And Kailash is famous as the place where the monkey Hanuman went to get the healing herb that would help Shiva recover from, I'm sorry, not Shiva, Rama from deadly wounds. So there you go.
oh, that is great. And I didn't know that one. And I know our other presenters, I had given you different ways to introduce yourself. You could also add that one if you'd like. Thank you, Tom, for sharing that. And now I also have a work one, more work related, not as personal. And that is from Priya Parker. And some of us, or many of us, read The Art of Gathering. And so this idea comes out of gathering, and it also I featured it in the latest SIG Network newsletter, the March newsletter, and it talks about generous exclusion, which I think is a really difficult idea for those of us in special education. We are very much about inclusion for the most part. Most of us are. Um, the idea of exclusion is really hard for us. Um, but the idea is that you have a purpose, and to reach that purpose, there are certain people that should be there to help reach that purpose, and there are certain people that's just not part of their role, part of their responsibility, part of what they need to do, or would make the group too large and therefore difficult to get to the group purpose. Sometimes a smaller group will do it. Those are just a couple of ideas, but I'd be interested to hear when have you generously excluded people when you are um, having a community come together, planning an event? And what did that look like? So no one has generously excluded people or folks who are not feeling like sharing at the moment.
I
I'm okay
think
with either answer.
Jennifer, Stacy, I'm sorry, my camera is off because I'm having lunch.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think I think, like you said earlier, that we've been conditioned to include others. So I'm literally trying to think when I purposely or intentionally excluded folks and the purpose of that, and I couldn't come up with a response to that because I
Yeah.
purposely
Yeah, that's
am
fair.
intentional
Right.
about including or highlighting folks who've gotten us to a specific point.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be open and hopefully folks don't, I won't name any names, but just hopefully no one will mind. Here's an example that might be helpful with the evaluators. We have had evaluators as a come together as a community before. And there have been times where everyone, other project personnel wanted to join the evaluators. And it was large and it was not necessarily focused because evaluation is going to look very different. If you're working on like survey instruments or statistics, that's a very specific aspect of evaluation as opposed to how do we think about our overall program evaluation, et cetera. So that's one of those times that maybe there needs to be a group that's talking about big evaluation and another group that wants to get down into really fine-grained detail about how it's done. So I think that's an example. It doesn't mean that you have pushed someone completely out. It means that you've found other ways to meet that need, but it might not be at that specific event you're planning. Yeah, it is a kind of a harder idea, but I welcome you all to read The Art of Gathering, or the SIG Network newsletter. And Kelsey, if you have a second when you put the link in the chat, because the SIG Network newsletter takes you to a free article where Priya Parker explains the idea, and she can say it better than I can. All right. Well, thanks everyone for engaging in that idea, even if it's a hard one. Yeah.
Meg has her hands up to.
Oh, sorry. Go, please. Go ahead.
I just
Oh, Jen.
I just had an example.
Okay.
I do it frequently. I've got a division of a lot of people, and I will frequently say to them, I'm going to be there at whatever meeting. I don't think you need to be there because we both don't need to be at that same. And then conversely, if somebody else from my division is going, I will say to them, I think you've got it. And unless you want me to be there, I'm not going to go. For the same reason, also, I feel like that lets people invest in their own autonomy isn't the word I want, but leadership, right? So they can be leaders of whatever that meeting is, wherever they need to be there. I should not need to be there at the same time. So that's sort of, I think that's an example of what you're talking about.
It's a great example. It is part of it, right? Like there's not just the purpose of your specific event, what you're trying to get to. There's also like, is this beneficial to the person? Because otherwise there are many other things they could probably be doing. If they're in education, there are many other things they could be doing, right? We have so much we could
time
accomplish.
and money, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really helpful. Well, so I welcome you. Oh, thank you, Kelsey, for adding the newsletter. I welcome you to read the little blurb in the newsletter. It's really short, so feel free to go to Priya Parker's article or read the book. But these are the 5 reasons that she provides in the article. Clarify and distill your gathering's purpose. Again, who's going to help fulfill that purpose, or who will it be helpful to? Helps us locate who the gathering is really for. Protects your guests and the purpose. I think that goes both ways, like Meg was saying. What the host is actually offering and gives it their best and highest use, what is on offering. And we know that there are some conversations, it can be so fruitful to have that conversation with a small group, but would be very uncomfortable to have with a larger group. In fact, nobody would say anything, right? Like, so there's this big webinar that we have, the director's webinar, which we don't get as many hands raised because it is so big, and that's fine. And I ask kind of a hard question for a large group, but we've been together for a long time. Yeah. All right, okay, so Sorry, I thought I had another slide on that. So thank you for walking with me through that idea. The next newsletter will have the third chapter from The Art of Gathering. This one was closing doors or closed doors. And I'm trying to remember what the third one is. Let's see. Get you all excited. Don't be a chill host. That's right. We always joke because John Lynn did not like that because he thinks being chill is a good thing. I shouldn't speak for him, but then he once he understood what she was saying, he was okay with it. So I look forward to hearing what you think. So what are we going to do today? We are going to go through the Research Minute, which is what we do every month now. We'll go through some SIG Network news, specifically about the OSEP conference, the OSEP NASD webinar series, Fidelity Friday, we have one on March 15th, some funding opportunities that we just released in the newsletter, and then Becky Gertis is going to share some of her recent learning. And this is another new feature of our directors webinars where folks get to, if they've been to a conference or a webinar or just had a really good conversation or read a book that you think would benefit others, you can bring it here. And then we are going to get into our presentation, what populations are we not serving? So Research Minute, this is from Reading Reform Across America from the Schenker Institute. All the ideas are theirs, not mine, that I'm going to be presenting today. So if you had to guess, and feel free to add this to the chat, what would you guess are the trends in reading reform? So if you're looking across the nation, what do you think is happening when it comes to trying to improve policies in reading? Structured literacy. Yep, definitely seen that. Science of reading, mandated programs. Absolutely. Simple view of reading. Yep, science reading. Yep. You folks know. All right, so let's see what the Schenker Institute found when they looked across all the states. So this is their good news again, their ideas. The bills that they looked at across the states, they found a lot of attention to the 5 pillars of reading, not just phonics, because that was one of the concerns, right? 34 state laws referenced the 5 pillars. The laws are targeting more students than previous legislation. So going beyond 3rd grade, 42 states went beyond 3rd grade. 31 of them included pre-K, and 37 of them covered charter schools. Only 12 states exclusively targeted Title I schools. The legislation is bipartisan and state-driven. They're comprehensive in both traditionally conservative and traditionally progressive states. There's a focus on the evidence, and they're looking at not just the evidence-based practices like the instructional practices, but also the materials that they're using, which is, I think, one of the interesting things that came out of this. And all but 4 states explicitly articulated this. They are looking at both pre-service preparation and professional development or in-service. And they're also looking at family involvement in literacy. This was another surprise to me. Not that I don't think it's important, not that we don't support it from OSEP with a center, et cetera, but the fact that more states are looking at it. So 38 states were looking at home school collaboration, and 21, it was really in-depth consideration. So this is the table that they provide. So how many bills are in, and if you look at the blues, it's discussed extensively versus mentioned. So that the deeper blue means deeper discussion of it. So students with dyslexia, deeply discussed in 33 bills or laws. English learners, 10, community engagement, 14. You can see family engagement, 21. Parent notification, tutoring after school. There's summer school, multi-tiered systems in 27 states altogether, 12 states deeply discussed. And I know that's of interest to a lot of us. Having a reading plan or a literacy plan, how assessment looks, and I'm sure alignment of assessment and instruction and the standards. Principal leadership, this is interesting to me. The curriculum that ties in with those instructional materials. The professional development, you can see 40 states, 32 deeply, and teacher preparation, 25 states, 13. And the teacher preparation part also warms my heart. You really want people to walk into the classroom knowing something about teaching reading, right? So these were the limitations that the Schenker Institute found, that oral language and writing were receiving a little less attention, that comprehensive supports for students are not getting as much focus as the Schenker Institute thinks they should. Additional supports for teachers. So deep dives into curriculum, school leadership, and then unequal attention to student groups. Dyslexia gets a lot of attention, but English learners not so much, only 10 states. Community engagement in this work. I know in the past, one interesting thing has been, let's work with barber shops, let's work with churches, let's get the, literacy out there. And so that could be part of what they're talking about. And fragmentation and missing links. One of the things that Mississippi Miracle has done is really think about the coherence and alignment across systems. Hard to do, takes a long time. They're saying it was insufficient. All right, any questions about the Schenker Institute or any thoughts before I move on?
I really
I'm gonna
find
go
it interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead, Becky.
Oh, I was just really surprised with the EL. I think you said that English learners are less emphasized. Just in working with EL learners, in that the strategies that they have and the vocabulary and the comprehension, the building of background, and with EL learners increasing in our country, that is really interesting to me that it's less emphasized.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the Department of Education here is trying to get more focus on it and doing a lot of work, having some policies come out, having toolkits come out. So hopefully that'll have a ripple effect. But that's a great point. So I'm gonna skip the news. You can see it here. It's in the newsletter. So go to that link that Kelsey gave you. You'll be able to see it. The next Fidelity Friday is March 15th. We're going to talk about motivation and how tapping into the motivation of your professional development participants can help you to increase fidelity. And we'll think about their knowledge, attitude, skills, aspiration, and behavior. And then I'm going to turn it over to Becky Gertis to share her learning.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Jennifer had opened up this opportunity for us to share and learn with each other. And at the Minnesota Department of Education, we are embarking on a journey in learning and growing together as it relates to equity, diversity, and inclusion, so that it can best support our work with students, staff, and also among us as MDE colleagues. And so I serve on a committee at the Minnesota Department of Education that really focuses in providing staff development, but more importantly, conversations among staff around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so one of the things that we're truly focusing on is this infographic here was created, and this guides our work. Once a month, we have a time where we come together as an organization to focus particularly on equity, diversity, and inclusion. But this right here serves as our focal point. And we're working in this middle circle there, you'll see critical consciousness. And that's our target. That's what we're working on, to build critical consciousness among all of us, individually, as an organization. And in our journey, if you look at this picture here, you'll see to get to that critical consciousness, we have broken it down between equity, diversity, and inclusion, and really focusing on the differences in those terms. And so equity is about ensuring that everyone has the resources they need to thrive. So looking at the individual, then that diversity piece, making sure that we have a variety of perspectives and backgrounds that are shared. And then the inclusion piece, creating that welcoming space where every individual feels valued, feels empowered. And then recognizing and appreciating these differences, that lays our foundation for building this approach to the uniqueness of each person and valuing each person for their contributions to truly have an inclusive and equitable community. The next slide. I'm going to give you a moment here on the left-hand side to read a quote that I have put in here. And the work that we do around equity, it's more than implementation. And that's what our work group has really focused on. It's a continuous cycle of learning and understanding. And our title of this slide is Not Racing to Action, and really acknowledging and valuing the conversations that are occurring and the connection that's happening, and then finding how it connects with our work that we're doing to strengthen and make a meaningful change. Next slide. Deepa Iyer is one of the individuals that we've been studying as a group. And she is a civil rights advocate. If you haven't heard of her, she's an author, she's a strategist, and she's known for her work on issues related to racial and social justice. And she's really worked with districts, with communities on racial equity, immigrant rights, and civil liberties. I'd like to give you 30 seconds here or so just to read her quote and to read and reflect on those questions that I provided. So the next slide, in response to those questions, how do we get off that seesaw? She has developed with her team this social change ecosystem framework. And that's the picture that you see here. And this tool has served as one of the guides. We have many different tools that we share, but this is just one of them that really helps articulate the values, delineate roles, and provide support for our organization to work toward equity. And it has two components. One of the components is that yellow circle in the middle, and those are the shared values. So it's equity, liberation, justice, solidarity. Those are the shared values. And then there's 10 roles around the outside that people and organizations often show up with when they're participating in equity work or social change efforts. And these are based on an ecosystem concept. And when you think of an ecosystem concept, what that means is that the more effective we are is when we're working together and we build connections with others. And so the more we know about each other, the stronger that will be. And so this ecosystem framework, it can be used as an individual to think about what roles suit you the best right now in the work you're doing. So you can look at it and look at those different descriptors, those 10 on the outside, or as an organization, you can look at it and how can we align our values with our actions so that we're more unified in our approach. The next slide is really helpful, is that it takes each of those 10 that were around that target yellow circle, and it has a description for each of those. And the next slide. What we have done then at one of our sessions, this is just an example, because I wanted to provide you with application that if you were interested, you could take back to your department, is individually having people think about, what are you seeking to change in your position, in your role, in your organization? Is it a system of power? Is it a mindset? Is it a policy? Sort of thinking about that framework. And then how do we have that more equitable, collaborative, forward-thinking process in place? Next slide. We then move to her ecosystem framework, and individually, if it's as an individual or organization, you would then look at those different 10 outlying interconnections. Like, are you a weaver? Are you an experimenter? And we unpacked each of those roles. And then what role, as you reflect on those, do you feel most comfortable with? And when you're working on social change issues or the issue that you're working on. And then what we've encouraged people to do is in a few weeks, revisit those choices and consider if you still find yourself in that role or if your involvement has evolved into another role. And so when we're working on it and you have the social issue, you would identify it. Like, I'm coming into our conversation today as a weaver. and then having those descriptions of what a weaver is so that the team that you're working collectively knows where your thoughts are embarking from. And by acknowledging these shifts in our perspectives, we can gain insight into our own growth, but also insight from our colleagues that we're working with on how they're approaching the social change issue. And so if we were at a presentation or at a facilitation that we were doing, we would ask people to choose which roles resonate with them today. And then in a few weeks, we would see, have you continued in that role or has it transformed into another role? The next slide. And you can also recognize that you play multiple roles. And the important thing is your roles shift depending on the context. It just brings meaning and understanding to those that are working with you so they understand that perspective that you're bringing in. The next slide. And then the next slide is, explore more. And if you're interested, this here is a link to the social change map that I shared with you for you to have access to. And then she also has other resources available. Open to
Great.
any questions and follow-up thoughts or insights.
Becky, this is Stacy. This is great. I really like the different roles that she highlights that you can play in informing DEI efforts, and I look forward to reading some more of her research.
And Stacy, reach out, please, if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk further, offline, feel free to reach out. We can definitely share more.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Becky. And someone else was talking about how they appreciate this. They've been looking and thinking, but this is a different perspective, right? And sometimes defining things or just having, some kind of graphic or a model that helps you to have some ways to put the ideas or categorize the ideas is really helpful.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this to us. And just a reminder, anyone else who's interested in sharing your learning next month or in the months beyond, just reach out to me or Kelsey and we will include you. All right. Oh, and also if you have any resources to share in the chat right now, folks are welcome to do so. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and introduce our next speakers and the topic for today. So it caught some people's attention, which I appreciate, the question of who are we not serving? And this question comes up in OSEP, I know, with folks who say, why don't more SPDIGs serve children with significant needs, or why aren't we serving these kids or these kids? And each state gets to make its own decision based on the needs that they see, the political will that exists, other things that they're aligning or leveraging at the moment, what their SIMR is, their state identified measurable result, et cetera. There are many reasons states choose to do the SPDIG that they do, their initiatives. We want today to provide you some ideas and some options, either for your current SPDIG or for future grant applications of what else is possible with this SPDIG. What can have a significant impact if you look in other populations or other initiatives. Again, it could be an addition or it could be something different that you do next time. I see both kinds of SPDIG. I see SPDIGs at each iteration of their, each time they have a new grant, they build on what they've done. And I see grants who do something completely different every time, and both work. It's all good, but this is our learning lab. So we're going to get some ideas from our presenters today. So we are going to cover today, we're going to cover adolescence or middle and high school. We are going to cover children with significant needs, American Indian students with disabilities, and also early childhood. So we are covering a broad expanse, and I'm really excited about it. We have different presenters for each. We're going to start off with Jocelyn Washburn and Suzanne Myers from University of Kansas, who are going to talk about serving adolescents with disabilities. Welcome. Turn it over to you.
All
Looks
right,
great.
welcome. To start with our introduction, since we were asked to introduce ourselves in an interesting way, I am choosing the bucket list option. So I will share on my bucket list is to go to Finland. My grandmother just passed away about a year ago. She was lived to quite an old age, but she is from Finland, and I would love to go back and sort of trace my ancestral roots and on the shores of Finland. And then Jocelyn, did you want to go ahead and?
Sure. I decided to shift to what you said we could share about a name. And so my son's name is Deland, and my husband would speak fondly of a professor named Deland Anderson at Virginia Tech, where he went to school. And so when found out we were having a boy, I thought, oh, what about that name Deland? And so I looked in the baby book of names and it wasn't there. So I liked that. It would be really unique. And then I Googled it and I found a whole bunch of professors also in England named Deland. So I decided it means philosopher. And my son, I willed this to happen. He's a very reflective person and questioned the existence of Santa when he was about 2. So I think it worked. I have a little philosopher who's now in high school. But anyways, that's where his name came from.
Oh, that is a great story. I just told my 5th grader for the first time. So that's a pretty impressive difference. That's a significant difference.
Yeah.
So we are going to be talking today about the strategic instruction model. And like Jennifer said, we are from the University of Kansas. We work in a small research center there called the Center for Research on Learning. I am the associate director of that center, and Jocelyn is the director of the Professional Development Research Institute. So we plan to give you an overview of the strategic instruction model's origins, kind of talk about the history. We want to give you a really high level overview of the comprehensive suite of services that we provide through SIM, provide you sort of a top 5 list of benefits for using SIM to improve teaching and learning for adolescents, and then dig in just a little bit and take a closer look at a couple of the most frequently used SIM strategies and routines, just to give you an idea of what they look like. We do want to emphasize that we are a research center. We do have products here that we're going to talk about, but we are first and foremost a research center housed within the University of Kansas, which is a Research One university. The strategic instruction model was created to provide strategies and routines to improve outcomes for adolescents with disabilities. But through the years, it has come to really serve all adolescents. And everything that we're sharing here is based on research that was conducted in the field. So it's really a way to develop products and ways to get research into the hands of teachers and to be used by students to improve outcomes. SIM resources have also been validated by external sources, and we'll share with you some of those later. And then just a little bit of history. SIM is part of the Center for Research on Learning, which was started more than 45 years ago now. Through the years, SIM has become kind of a go-to resource for improving adolescent literacy, but we want to share that we define literacy really broadly to mean reading, writing, speaking, listening, and also generally communicating and comprehending across all content areas. And the SIM strategies and routines are intended to be used very broadly like that as well.
So to share broadly about what is the strategic instruction model, there are 2 arms within SIM. There are content enhancement routines and learning strategies. They both have that overarching goal of improving adolescent literacy. Because it's an approach to teaching and learning, some of the common features of both arms of SIM are that there is available a continuum of intensity of instruction and a continuum of explicit instruction. And so that is built into the specific tools, the instructional tools themselves, but it's also how you use them. So if you're aligning them with the use within a multi-tiered systems of supports, then you can change that level of intensity and explicitness in that way. They are designed in the research process. When we build them, we look at what are the course demands students in adolescents are facing. And so they're responsive to those demands that they have. When content enhancement routines and learning strategies are used, teachers are able to have measurable results. They see their students make progress. They're also intended to be generalizable. So when students are learning in one setting, in any setting, then they intentionally, each of the routines and the strategies incorporate ways teachers can promote transferring their use to other classrooms, other settings, as they're applicable to match the strategy to the task or the demand that the student is faced with. Also, in addition to the research that goes into these, historically, we don't just look at making a statistical difference. We look at making a socially valid difference. And so teachers and students, they report increased confidence in learning, increased confidence in teaching. And then even looking at the results within a study to see, are students moving from a D to a B or a C to an A, so that they're seeing a difference that they can witness and it's really tangible to them.
So this is a really detailed slide just to show the simple, give the simple idea that it's not really about the materials. As all of you know, materials are one thing, and you can give instructors materials, and it doesn't necessarily mean that instruction is going to improve. And so SIM Professional Learning really capitalizes on what you see across the top. It's grounded by adult learning theory. We really believe strongly in Jim Knight's partnership principles, and we're committed to being adaptive and responsive to local contexts, whatever the challenges are that they're facing there. What you'll see on the left, you may be familiar with from Linda Darling Hammond's work, just features of professional learning that research shows means that professional learning is more likely to be impactful and effective. And then on the right, you'll see the professional learning model components that we adhere to, that we provide infrastructure support for building capacity of individual teachers. That includes all those things that you see on the bullets, administrator participation and needs assessment, building plans so that those changes are sustained over time. Providing high quality professional development with the materials so that teachers can see how to use the materials once they get into their own spaces and start to use them. And then of course, technology enabled and evidence-based instructional coaching. We've done quite a bit of work on virtual coaching and research into testing and building virtual coaching support systems so that nobody can basically so that all students get to be taught by a well-supported educator, and that geography and time and money aren't barriers to providing instructional coaching.
So we think about a professional learning approach that is really comprehensive and adaptive to fit the needs of the school where SIM is being implemented and well supported. We also wanted to share with you a couple different sources of that external validation that shows how when SIM is used by teachers, how much promise there is that they're going to see a difference with their students. So we have our own research when we initially designed it, but then there are these other sources. And so one of them is the Johns Hopkins website that has evidence for ESSA, and they've reviewed several of the SIM studies and then found it to have a strong ESSA rating. Another place to look is the National Center for Intensive Interventions. 14 of the SIM learning strategies have been reviewed through their process, and then you can review yourself those studies on their academic tools chart. We also really like to build crosswalks that help support professional developers working with schools to say, how can SIM help to meet the area and initiative of area of focus? And so this is one really strong example of a tight alignment is with the high leverage practices for students with disabilities. And so when a SIM learning strategy or a content enhancement routine is being used by a teacher, it really makes the high leverage practices come alive because they're embedded within learning strategies and content enhancement routines, even though they existed well before the HLPs were published, because they align. They are what good instruction looks like for specially designed instruction. And so two are featured here, teaching cognitive and metacognitive strategies, and then using scaffolded supports. The alignment shows the alignment across all 22 HLPs, and we have that on our website to explore further. And then, of course, a lot of schools focus on John Hattie's meta-analysis. And so we've pulled out what are the top instructional practices that make a difference in student achievement, which ones are beyond that hinge point of more than 1 year's worth of growth, and then showing that those are also embedded within learning strategies at the top. Content enhancement routines are shown at the bottom of the screen. And so again, SIM makes what teachers are being asked to do, it gives them something really concrete that they can get in their classroom and do right away.
And I think one of the great values of SIM is that teachers see immediate practical application to it. So this is a graphic that just shows some of the practical questions that teachers might have. They have students who need help just remembering the content. They have students who need a lot of support with writing in their content areas. Some students who need that specially designed instruction that Jocelyn was just talking about, just to access the curriculum. And so now we want to turn and just give you a little taste of a couple of one sentence writing strategy and one routine called the concept mastery routine, just so that you can see how these look in practice.
So in the learning strategies arm of SIM, a lot of development goes into a specific one of the learning strategies. And so how does KU-CRL define a strategy? So going beyond just an individual's approach to a task, it really breaks down, peels apart, what is a person thinking and acting? What is that mental process, those decisions that someone goes through when they are using a strategy? They're planning for it, actually performing the strategy, and then evaluating on the performance to see, did that strategy help me to reach my goal? And so this screen here is the only purpose is to show that now there are more than 50 learning strategies, and these are just the categories of the different strategies that students are able to, teachers teach them through an explicit instructional process. And then they're able to use them independently across their day or their life, or even after they graduate. The stages of instruction are foundational to SIM learning strategies. And so all of those learning strategies on the previous screen have these stages embedded. And so it begins with a pretest, looking at students' skill,
Actually, I'll put it in.
Current skill level. And then having the students make a commitment to say, I do want to learn this strategy. And my teacher has told me that this has great promise. Other students have been successful when they have learned this strategy. And then the teacher describes the strategy to the students. What is it going to look like? What are the steps? The teacher then models the strategy through both covert and overt behaviors, so that the students can see what does it look like when it's being used with proficiency. And that's where there's always a mnemonic for strategies that provide students with steps to perform that strategy. Verbal practice is when they verbally explain that they do understand the steps of strategy and they understand the foundation of it, so that then they can begin to practice it. Controlled practice starts them at their ability level and they have feedback that's corrective, timely, and descriptive while they're practicing increasingly difficult materials that move through until they're practicing with grade level materials. And then post-test and making commitments to generalize, they can celebrate success and look at the difference that has taken place in their performing a certain skill. And then generalization is really a 4-phase process that's very supportive for the students to practice. So sentence writing is the one that we wanted to highlight, and to know that there's fundamentals in sentence writing and proficiency in sentence writing. Fundamentals starts with how to write a simple sentence and check it for completeness. The students learn 4 types of simple sentences. And then if that's the starting point, after that, they can move into proficiency and pick up with compound complex and compound complex sentences, learning dependent and independent clauses, and how to punctuate all of this correctly. And so it's really a really great structured approach to teaching writing. And on the bottom left of the screen, it shows the difference in one of the studies was that students were writing 70% complete sentences. And then after learning, they wrote 98% complete sentences. But how about their complicated sentences, which are compound complex or compound complex? Before, they wrote 18% complete complicated, and then afterwards 58%, which is good. You still want to write simple sentences.
So Jocelyn talked about the learning strategies arm, and this is where we talk a little bit and just share with you about the content enhancement routine arm of SIM. Content enhancement routines, or CERs, they're a way to teach, reinforce, or deepen understanding of existing course standards and content. This shows one of the key features of a content enhancement routine, which is a graphic organizer that is co-constructed with teachers and students. So this graphic organizer, this is a very meta slide. It shows a unit organizer, graphic organizer that you would do with students, but it's showing the different content enhancement routines that exist. So you can see there are 3 different routines that involve planning and leading learning. There are 4 different routines that involve explaining text, topics, and details. This is an example of the graphic organizer that goes with the concept mastery routine. So in the case of like a social studies classroom, when you want students to learn about democracy, for example, you might put democracy up there. And then the next slide shows what this could look like. For example, in a chorale class or something, this is not handed to students completed. This is something that's co-constructed. So while they're building the concept diagram, teachers are accessing prior knowledge, helping students categorize concepts and information. They're analyzing characteristics that define a concept and supporting students to discriminate and evaluate new examples to test if they do or do not represent the concept that's under study. And then teachers can help to build a definition with students that, they think fits that definition of the concept. So we have a poll for you, and the question in your project, what needs could be addressed by SIM? And so we put this same slide that was shown previously.
We're at about a 50% response. So I'll just give it one more minute here.
Can you see it, Suzanne?
I can.
Okay, great.
Can you see it,
I can
Jocelyn?
see it. Yes,
Okay.
I can also see it. Can everyone else see it? I guess that's.
So we got 67% said specially designed instruction, 48% comprehensive reading intervention, 33% understanding and remembering critical content, and then writing, math, and student collaboration were all 19%. Is that a surprising result to you all? Jocelyn and Suzanne?
Well, I don't think it's surprising that specially designed instruction comes up as high, and then thinking about what can we do for adolescents with reading instruction. Writing often doesn't, when we think about populations that don't get attention, I think writing often doesn't get a lot of attention. And that was even in the information you were sharing earlier with the new legislation as well. So I think that part, I wish that writing could be something that could be more of addressed. But I definitely think that specially designed instruction going beyond providing accommodations and modifications and actually incorporating it into instruction is a high need, and SIM would really help with that piece. With our final minute, Jennifer, do you want any question in the chat or anything to that effect?
Did we have one more poll? Was that the only poll?
We were just going to do one
This
poll.
was
Oh,
it.
okay. Thanks. Okay. No, yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat. You can use your mic. We have the SIM Dream Team here. And I know you all have worked with North Carolina and Florida. Any other states with SPDIGs?
Virginia, which is in my background. I worked with the Virginia SPDIG project when I was there.
Yeah, great. I was hoping we'd have a few minutes to share North Carolina's data or Florida's data, but we'll have to do it at another time to ensure all the speakers have enough time. But some of you have seen it before in newsletters that they've had great impacts. They've been able to show improved reading results on progress monitoring, sometime on even statewide student achievement tests. So it can really work. And this is, I'd say the strategic instruction model probably has the most research behind it. It and PALS, right, probably are like equal in terms of the evidence base. It's a huge evidence base. So we know it works, and it's so nice to see that you've built the professional learning around it and the capacity building and have the implementation science perspective on it. Thank you for joining us. I hope you can stay with us. It was really nice to have you join us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So as promised, we talked about adolescents, and now we're going to talk about children with significant needs. We invited Allison Gauld from Tennessee to speak with us, and she is doing a great job. She and her team at Tennessee are showing such fantastic impact on teacher efficacy, on inclusion, on children, and child outcomes. So it is still a relatively new project. So there is much more to come, but I will turn it over to Allison.
Thank you. There's much more to come, for sure. I'm trying to get my
yeah. So I'm going to say while she's getting her PowerPoint up, we were chatting the other day in preparation for this meeting, and she was telling me about her dog, who her dog is her coworker, always sits next to her and basically watches her work. And I said, it'd be really great to have a picture of that so people could get an image of what it looks like when you're not visiting a school or a district. And so she was kind enough to add that.
Yes, you'll get to meet my coworker here in a sec. All right. He's not like live here. He's asleep, but
okay.
Yeah, he's asleep.
And if you have trouble, you got it. I was gonna say
I got it. It's just arguing with me internally. All right. So yeah, I'm very pleased to share the Teaching All Students project. It is our Tennessee SPDIG. I have been the Tennessee director for this the whole time, the conceiver, the inventor, but I am by no means the whole project. I am very, very excited that I have as many partners as I do in this work. But most importantly, the partners I have are the schools that have been a part of this. So as I share, I'm really sharing others' work, but I am also sharing a little bit of the behind the scenes today as we start talking about what does this look like for our students with significant needs. So this is our logo. It's on purpose, our logo, and I try and include it on everything. You will notice we have little boxes for our kind of our concepts, which are our 3 core values of heard, valued, challenged. Those are to mirror the communication system of the very learners we're talking about. So we're trying to include them from just even the image all the way into our work, and also model how we do this inclusive learning. So our logo is the first story of many stories for us. This is our state strategic plan, and our work really is embedded in all of this. So I am part of the task team for the Department of Ed. I also have my speech and language coordinator, Jamie Seek. My director was formerly our speech and language coordinator. She was part of it, and really all eyes are on it. And then you will see a picture of Floyd, my co-worker here in my office. My desk is such that it's really tall, so I can stand at it or sit at it, and I appear the same. So he literally sits on a little bar stool for most of the day with me. He's pretty good. So we're going to give him credit for that, because that's pretty impressive for a 1-year-old. But it's his own fault being purchased by a mom who's a special educator to learn behavior and behavior management. But I also have on my team from Vanderbilt University, Dr. Alexandra DeFont. And then she manages an intensive coaching team, which I'll tell you about that. We partner with ARC Tennessee, which is our parent outreach. They are a big component of this as we make sure that parents understand the work. We have a coordination team in Knoxville, and we have an incredible evaluation team. Many of you know some of our members of our evaluation team from the Human Development Institute in Kentucky, led by Jeremy, but I have Jamie Lake and Ken on my team, and really without them, none of this work would be as valuable as it is, because they really help us shape it every single month. So we have a quick poll. So Kelsey, I don't know if you can show the poll. I don't know if I'm able to see it, but you should have a poll for Mentimeter.
It's coming.
Okay, perfect. So just find out if your state even has an initiative that in any way is increasing the engagement of students with cognitive disabilities in general ed. And I do want it, while you are answering, I will just say in Tennessee, I refer to them as students with complex needs, because often we have, and we all know this, some students that are misidentified because their language impact is to such a degree we believe they have a cognitive disability. So I usually refer to students with complex needs. So if I say that on accident, please know it's the same group. All right. So most of you do not. Okay, I think we have another poll where you're going to rank for me who you think is the most accessible group of stakeholders. So you're going to see your choices of general ed teachers, special ed teachers, parents or families, school administrators, and district administrators. Who's the most accessible for you to engage with?
This is an interesting one. Kelsey, is this a new feature? I haven't seen this before.
I asked her to do the rank. I hope that's okay.
No, of course. Love it.
Yeah, this is a fun one. I think we haven't tried it before.
Yeah, anything new. Kelsey and I get excited.
Okay, it looks like it's kind of settled in. Oh, no, people move in it, but it's still in the same order where we're finding that the general ed teacher and the parents are our least accessible. And I ask you this on purpose because of who our team is composed of. Our team for each participating school is a special education teacher, a general ed teacher, a school administrator, and a district coordinator, and all 4 come to all of these meetings. So it's interesting because I think we all have opinions of who will show up. And so we sometimes shape our SPDIG based on who we think is likely to attend. But we have found that all 4 have very willingly come. And in fact, several of our general ed teachers have asked to be present for the full training, even the training that's the intensive for special ed teachers, and we've let them. So they not only have come, but they've asked to come for extra days. So this is where I'm just kind of highlighting, we even struggled, should we require it, should we not? And I think sometimes as state leads, our beliefs about people's participation gets in the way. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that felt this way, though. You felt very much the way I did before I started. I think I have one more question for this moment. Yes. So this is an open response for you to say, what do you think they need to increase instructional access for students with complex needs or students with significant cognitive disabilities? What do they need to learn?
That's a thinker.
I know.
I'm hoping our Guam folks are on because their day is just starting, and so that'll be easier for those of us in the East Coast. It's the afternoon, so it takes an extra minute.
Best practices, or just anything, right? any best practice at all. How to make the curriculum concrete. So kind of that accessible, not just in being present, but really being able to take meaning from it. I'm always a fan of less worksheets. If for no other reason than the copier was always broken, right? Examples of roles and responsibilities. Sure. Inclusive strategies, differentiation. Got like an 18% response rate here, but we'll go on for the sake of, okay, there we go. Values of the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and examples of how to differentiate. Collaboration. For sure, schools are not designed for collaboration, right? It's collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Now go in that classroom with the kids, lock the door because it needs to be locked at all times, but collaborate. It's a very weird mixed message. And professional development for sure. All right, I appreciate you all sharing that. Kelsey, I'll go back to sharing. I really appreciate y'all chiming in. I think you had a lot of the same ideas I did, and of course I had a few more. So I want to share, this is where we started when we had the opportunity to say, what are we going to do with our next SPDAG? My assistant commissioner came to me, and I forgot to say, I'm the low incidence and autism coordinator. And she said, Allison, you have been saying that nothing we're doing is reaching this population or changing their outcomes. What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. So I sat in an office with a whiteboard, and I'd bring in my speech and language coordinator, and I'd bring in my school psychologist, and I would bring in my interventionist, and I'd bring in the math teacher, and I'd bring in all these people one at a time and say, what do we want to do? And capture notes and kind of put them in categories. And in the center, you'll see what we originally were going to name ours is just students are students. We're students first. Because we just felt like the idea that students with significant disabilities are students was missing in the way we approach so much. There was always this, we're going to talk about, for example, we talked about the reading research at the beginning. And if you look at a lot of those reading laws, there is an exception clause for students with significant cognitive disabilities somewhere in that legislation on many, many states. So it's like, we want reading for everyone, sort of. We want learning for everyone, sort of. And so we're really going to try and attack that. And so this board became our proposal for the SPDAG grant. Now I will tell you, it would have been easier if I could have just sent Jennifer this picture when we submitted, but of course we didn't. We had to go through the whole grant writing. But I just wanted to share with you that I think it starts with really dreaming about where are the holes, the gaps, the links, and the opportunities for students to be students, regardless of their cognitive disability. And then to start to think about where are those barriers and how do we move them? And that's exactly what we did. So for us, that meant we needed to address three things. One, like many of you said, we needed to provide them some very strategic training on what it means to be inclusive. What are inclusive strategies? What does it mean to have an inclusive mindset? You know, I want to go back to the framework that was given to us earlier. I can't remember the name of the map, but I do remember the name of the role, Weaver, right? But we needed to give them that mindset of how that works and how that works for everyone. We needed to also be really cognizant of the coaching, because we decided the best way to know that this was going to work was to do this with high schools. So not only are we doing low incidence, but we're doing high school, which I think makes you all go, what? Your high school general education is showing up? Your high school principals are showing up? They absolutely are. But that's because of the coaching. And we knew it. We wanted coaching that changes the system of the school. And we wanted coaching for the special education teacher to make sure that they were also growing in their expertise. And so that's what we did. We split it into two ways. And that intensive coaching is the coaching that's run by Vanderbilt. They're using GoReact software. If you're familiar with that, it's a chance for the teacher. We're actually really working on making sure that every student leaves with communication. So they have a target student who doesn't have effective communication. They're doing a lot of videos of that interaction. And then through that intensive coaching, identifying that the teacher is acknowledging attempts to communication, the teacher is acknowledging where there's barriers and moving them, whether it's an access barrier or an opportunity barrier. So that was one whole thing, but mine is around how do we make sure the system accounts for all students? So these are our three pieces. Jennifer saw a presentation where I explained these three pieces with Legos because I believe in modeling, but I couldn't do that virtually. And we do engage with our schools for 3 years. So they commit for 3 years. In year one, they're looking at why. And the guiding question is, why are we even teaching standards to these students? We hear that so often. Why are we required to assess students with cognitive disabilities? Why do we have to give them the alternate assessment? They're not able to communicate. They can't do this, they can't do that. And usually that tells me a lot about the mindset when I see can't, right? So why are we teaching standards to students with complex needs? And I could do an entire presentation on that because I believe that so strongly. But year two, we get into, well, now that we know why, because we spent a whole year on it, now that we know why, we need to know what to teach. We need to know how to teach it. And when do we teach this? Because they also have all these IEP goals over here and they have all these other needs. What do we do to make that happen? So in that year, for the whole team coming to the training, we actually dismiss the school administrator and the school or the district special ed director after the first full day, where we talk about some systems around how to make sure this happens. And the general ed teacher and the special ed teacher work side by side on pedagogy and strategies for teaching students with complex needs, standards-based instruction. And their conversations are so rich and so amazing. I think I saw Jamie was on here. I don't know if Ken is, but Jamie, if you want to pipe in, please feel free, because I know you attend these trainings and you listen at the table as one of our evaluators. And then year three, we get to, so now that we know why, and we know what to teach and when and how, who's supposed to do it? Because you see, we flip the model. So often we approach these kinds of SPDIGs and we say, let's get the kids in the classroom. Let's get them in the classroom. But nobody knows why they're there and nobody knows what to do when they're there. So instead, we flipped the model and we said, let's make sure they know why and what to do so they can start asking us, well, why isn't the kid in my room? Instead of us saying they should be in your room. It's a very different message. It's a very different approach, but it seems to be working. It seems to be working in spades for us. So it's who and then where. And the schools are asking, so who's teaching them? Where should they be taught? Instead of us just asking them. And so I'll give you a little bit about our data, but first I want to show really what this framework becomes for them is about access, which is a pretty general term. And I think gets stuck at that like ADA level of access is in ability to get in the room. But we move in a para, we move in separate materials. So essentially we just move special ed into general ed. So what is access? And so we talk about how there's 3 levels. There's that very first level, that's proximity, which is having access to peers, access to the classroom. That is a good step for some schools, but unfortunately, so often we stop there. So then we encourage all of our schools that are working with us to go to that next level of engagement. Now that they're in proximity, Let's make sure they're engaged in that instruction. They're engaged in even activities, pep assemblies, school dances, school sports, fundraising efforts, field trips. They should be involved at the same level as their peers. What does that look like? From there, if you want to go even further to truly become inclusive, it's when you start to talk about potential. This is where we talk about dignity of risk. So somebody brought up the dignity. We talk about even what does our discipline look like? If a student with significant cognitive disabilities breaks a rule, do we automatically either let it go or do we leave it to the teacher to impart the discipline when that would typically be something in which the school administrator would be involved? Are we allowing things because we feel bad for them instead of expect best for them? So it's really, how do we have equitable expectations for the student to grow? And that this is also the place where students can safely fail is in school. So we should give them the chance to not always get the right answer, to not get into something just because they try, right? I think about the students I had who were accepted into the talent show every year. They had no talent. They hadn't put in any effort to practice. They hadn't tried, but just because they had a significant cognitive disability, when they signed up, they were allowed in. But then what happens when they leave our school and they go to apply for a job? They're not going to just be let in. When they go to an activity, they're not going to be just let in. We need to teach also how to accept a no and what to do from that and to pick yourself up. And if we get into true inclusion, where we start to not even know to call it that, because inclusion, of course, means that there's an us and them. It is an exclusionary term. If we truly get to the true intention of inclusion, though, then we've created this sustained system where the entire system and the logic of the system is set up so that all students are students and all students' needs are met, regardless of the label that's attached to that student. And that even includes how we fiscally allocate resources, materials, staff. It's very common in our low incidence classrooms in Tennessee that you will not see any approved curriculum available. The teachers are making it all on their own. There's not the purchased materials. That's not equitable. So this is kind of our model that we work from. And because of this model, we've had a few wins. So one, our districts want to come back. Like, they love this work and they're like, can we sign up more schools? And they are. So they're signing up more of the high schools in their districts. I have one district that's a one high school district that wants to come back. And I'm like, you've learned what I've got to teach you. You're ready to fly. So we're working on them believing me in that, but they just hate to step away from the work. Our special education teachers have gone to their district level and said, this needs to happen in all our schools. I think I could lead that work. Can I do so? And we already have 4 out of our first cohort that are stepping into leadership, and 1 that has started a program for inclusive higher ed at one of our colleges. And our students are leaving with communication systems. Students who never spoke prior to their school engaging in this, who never had a system that allowed them to make a choice or tell us what's on their mind, are leaving communicating. To me, that's everything. And we continue to have more and more schools participate. We also are seeing increased access. 100% of our schools in cohort 3, and I think it's 85% of our schools in cohort 2, have gone to having every single student receive at least one academic class in general ed, meaning English language arts, math, science, social studies, or CTE. So they're not just going to PE, art, lunch, they're going to class. We're seeing more and more students graduate with a competitive diploma. In Tennessee, we have 4. So competitive for us is either the occupational AAD or the traditional. In the past, they just received the special ed diploma, which is not competitive. Kids are communicating. Our teachers feel like experts. We've had general ed teachers who have gone back and received their special education license as part of this so that they can do both, because they don't want to give up either, and they're doing both. We've also seen some of our general ed teachers who have partners that are coming to the training where we have more than one general ed teacher, or they come to the coaching because they want to learn more about it. We have students participating in non-special ed events that are extracurricular at school, including a student who went to all-state wrestling, who wouldn't have even been given a chance to try out for the team a few years ago. We have a shared mindset where we're hearing different language and different talk across these schools. I know Ken came to a coaching session with me, and just the way we talk about the students is very different. And then just the amount of friendships and things that I'm hearing from even parents in ARC. We'll meet with our parents and community, and they're even hearing different language.
Allison,
Yeah.
so sorry to interrupt you. Would it work for you to come back on the April webinar in the learning section and share more about the coaching, etc.?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we have 2 more speakers, and I want to make sure we give them an opportunity.
I think I've done it.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that was okay.
Yeah, no, I can certainly come back. And these are just our big wins from the teams. This
Excellent.
is what the adults shared. I think the only other thing was, like, I was going to give a Mentimeter just to see how many people feel we need to ever tell a school administrator to put away a computer or a phone. And I'll just give you, like, the thing, not one, not ever, not at any time. Have we ever seen an administrator take out a phone or computer in training?
Oh, it's amazing. That's
So,
amazing. I used to watch that with Rob Horner when he would present. He was a great presenter, and nobody would leave to go to the bathroom. I was like, this is a great piece of professional learning data that we should be collecting.
but that's
Allison,
not on our report that we send in for our APR, you know.
the bathroom part of the report. So thank you so much. It is really, I think can probably speak for others. It is just such a ray of hope to hear you talk about this project. And a cool thing I heard recently was DEIB, and probably some of you have heard this. It's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which I think is a fantastic way to say it, and potentially means that we're talking about children with disabilities. So thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all.
Yeah, this was great. And then I'm going to bring Tom onto the stage. Tom Delaney, who is was already ready to speak fast, and I
knew it.
Everyone knows Tom, so he needs no introduction. Go, Tom.
All right, this is gonna be fast, everyone, and then you're gonna follow up with me, okay? Give me a thumbs up if you got that. Jocelyn, give me a thumbs up. Did that work? There you go. Thank you. All right, everybody. I'm Tom Delaney from the Minnesota Department of Education. I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of the SPDG we have. So my bucket list, I am also a musician. For me, being an educator and working with cultural communities has always been one and the same thing. So I have like a quarter of a century career in playing Latin music. I'd love to play with Los Lobos any day. I'm ready to hop on stage. I know every song and all the solos. In Minnesota, our SIP SIMMER focuses on graduation rates for Black and American Indian students with disabilities. This round of our SPDG focuses specifically on the graduation rates for American Indian students with disabilities served in schools around tribal communities. It's like step 2 of our first SPDG that focused on urban populations. So our SPDG and SIMMER is really about making the SIP and SIMMER work in a community and cultural context, like intense cultural context. Minnesota, we have 11 federally recognized tribal communities, 13 in total. That means 2 communities that are not recognized by the federal government, but yet can document their historical existence. So we have a very rich fabric of indigenous peoples in the state of Minnesota between the Anishinaabe and the Dakota people. You might remember OSIP Fast Facts. I love that data product. I talked to Jennifer about it a week or so ago. And so OSIP has done a good job, or did a good job, of pushing out graduation rates specifically for American Indian students with disabilities under the federal definition of that term, using the federal demographic system. When we took a look at it, we also took a look at IES and CES data for the same group. And this is a much even easier chart. You see that 74% there. All right. Our problem in Minnesota is when we took a look at 6-year graduation rates, we have all Minnesota students up there around upper 80%. And when you take a look at American Indian students with disabilities, we are down in the 50s. And at one point I checked, and it would always have to be confirmed, we may have the biggest graduation gap there in the nation. So, but definitely something of concern. In Minnesota, we take a very mathematical approach to problem solving. We take a look at how many kids we're talking about. And in this case, there's about 7,687 American Indian students with disabilities, with the lowest graduation rate of all student groups, lowest proficiency rates, and 4 times more likely than white peers to be identified with a disability. Now, the cool thing is mathematically, like you, we have a state system that can tell us precisely where these kids are, which school districts, which school buildings, and you can literally get in the truck and drive to where they are and walk into the classroom and see the kids. That's an amazing power that you may not think about too much, but was the key to our approach to this. Here's another thing. How is this not an ideal situation? Aircraft carrier and a canoe. So when you have small numbers of American Indian students, usually what happens is everyone kind of brushes it under the rug or in the shadows because it's not the one that's going to make you famous or your career. It's not a big group. Yet at the same time, I always contend this is an ideal situation because you have small numbers, which makes change more feasible in shorter amounts of time. We also know that small numbers mathematically add up to big numbers over time. So that's good news for your overall state rate. You got a great opportunity. It'll add up to measurable, nice changes in your state totals. And I also like to flip it too. For you, it may seem like a small group, but when you are working with specific school buildings in specific communities to those individual students, it is a total existential change when you do it right. The impact is huge. It's not diluted over a student group that may be huge. People experience huge change. I got some reflection questions here. I think this PowerPoint will go out as well. I got a couple for you. Whoever you are with your SPDG, do you know how many American Indian students you're serving right now? And it's okay if you don't. And how many American Indian students with disabilities is your SPDG reaching right now? And it's okay if you don't know that for now, but go back and check and take a look. In Minnesota, we got a big goal to increase those graduation rates, and we're doing it in 4 ways. We continue to support the urban schools. We are supporting Check and Connect implementation with something called Expanding the Circle, which is also from U of M, in school systems that serve these tribal communities. At the same time, we know that students benefit from receiving instruction from teachers who come from their own communities and look like them. So we're increasing the number of retained teachers. And we're working with Pacer Center, our parent training and information center in Minnesota, to increase family engagement, not in a big state way, but again, specifically in the school building with the parent committees, both special education and American Indian Ed in each school system. We have 3 cohorts of schools we're working with for a total of 10 school systems. The green ones were the first ones in the urban areas, and now we're getting into outstate Minnesota and school systems that serve our bigger tribal communities. So if you put the tribal map next to where we are, that's the yellow dots you see there, we are getting to a place where we are accessing and serving the tribal communities wherever they are across the state. Couple reflection questions again. Do you know how many American Indian students with disabilities your serves? Just a repeat there. If you were to map it in your state, what would it look like? Basically, I could sum up this slide. It's straight math, right? So what you want to do is figure out where the kids are and go directly work intensely with those school systems. Support them in picking something that'll work for them, Check and Connect and Expand the Circle in our case. Get down to picking the kids that you need to receive that and need it to work. When you go to the other side, the bubble upside there, Fidelity will help you out, get implemented with Fidelity, and those numbers will show up in your state rate numbers. Always remember Canoe, okay? All right, we use active implementation frameworks, probably like many of you are. Again, these are some slides that summarize, don't forget the other parts we're doing, working to retain those teachers. working with the Parent Training and Information Center to actually expand their capacity to better connect American Indian families with both our state special education agency, us, MDE, and locals. Is it working? We have indications that things are getting better. If you take a look at our chart here, we use a state definition for our measurements within the state, and that means that's self-identified American Indian, because the way it works with the federal system, it misses out on a lot of people that have multiple ethnic identities where they're Native and there's something else, okay? But we have some pretty good indications that things are working. This kind of work too, we know it's going to take 10 years. We know it's going to take 15 years. Maybe like your state, we have about 150 to 175 years of history between the state government and the education system that we're trying to kind of turn the tide on. So we're okay with it being a long haul because we're confident in that canoe effect. Reflection questions for you. Do you know the disaggregated results for American Indian students in your SPDG? Have you ever done the disaggregation? Take the big number and find out who is it really working for? And the follow-up question, take any group, American Indian students with disabilities could be one, and simply ask, is it working specifically for them? And if it's not, it's okay, but you can start the conversation. Today, think about one thing you could do to get those results front and center, maybe in your SPDG. You know, just have a table that everyone gets to look at that talks about how your SPDG is working for American Indian students with disabilities. It's okay if you're not doing it, but when you want to, you should. And if you need any help, email me. I will help you, okay? I am committed to that. The cool stuff that's happening is all the next level spin-off stuff. So for example, we're talking to tribal communities now around using Check and Connect within the community with all of the students who live on the reservation or live around the reservation as part of their tribal plan. We're talking about expanding the circle, which is a secondary transition curriculum for students with disabilities, but can we pair that with Ojibwe language revitalization because we know of the effect that has on sense of future for kids. And if you're in a state with a large Native population on the side, you know, we're really trying to work with the suicide risk and suicide rate for Native youth. It's a very sad thing. Work with a tribe to take a look at personalized education plans, not IEPs, not other stuff, but tribally generated things that would capture the elements of educational supports for all kids, including students with disabilities. And then also like that secondary transition piece, tying that into economic development for the tribe's own community. You know, if a community wants to be self-sufficient, sovereign in an economic sense, how can we bring along secondary transition for that, including for students with disabilities? That is my super fast tour.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you. Bidamia, if you got any questions, let me know. I love talking to people about this. And there you go. I'm done. Thank you.
And folks are also welcome to join our Native American working group where we talk about all this. So thank you so much, Tom. And I'm going to welcome to the stage Meg. And Meg, I don't remember, is it Porcella or Porcella? It's been bugging me.
We say Porcella because we're those kind of Italians.
Because you went to Ellis Island and probably no one knew how to say it. So Meg is going to talk to us about early childhood in Vermont with this PDIG. And thank you, Meg.
Okay. And I'm going to hope that I'm sharing the right screen.
You are.
Okay. So in 3 minutes, do I have 3 minutes?
You do. Although you can keep going and folks can drop off if they need to, and then we'll have the recording of it. So that might be really nice to do. So everyone can, you know, if you have other things to go to at the half hour after 4 here, go ahead and drop off, but we will have it recorded then and you can come back to it. We loved all our presenters today and we knew it's always, you know, it's hard to get a lot of presentations in. So thank you.
I agree. Okay, so this is a slice of our Vermont State Personnel Development Grant that I really wish we called that in Vermont, but we call it SPDIG. And I couldn't get them to change it. Connecticut does SPDG too, and it's just so lovely to hear. So I'm working off of 2 different computer screens, but I'll get there. So the overall purpose was to change educator knowledge through changing practices to getting to changing habits. And as we've heard, similarly in Vermont, cohorts engage for 3 years with us. The goal is to sort of answer the questions: what habits do we need to change to provide the best instruction and intervention to our children and students? And when we were thinking of applying for the SPDIG, we saw that there was that Part C option. And so we were looking at our early childhood context, which is important to understand. And also, I don't know how this works in other states. I should, but I don't. So in Vermont, the IDAC, that infant and toddler, is dealt with in the Vermont Agency of Human Services. And there are Children's Integrated Service, which are all kids. And then there are early interventions, which are the infants and toddlers who have that one plan, or the baby IEP. And they're organized regionally across the state of Vermont. When we get to the pre-K aged kids, Vermont does universal pre-K, but in a mixed delivery model. So there are some pre-kindergartens serving 3 through 5-year-olds, depending on when they start kindergarten, in a public school setting, as well as in private settings. And that's our universal pre-K model. And that is co-coordinated by the Agency of Education, where I work, and the Agency of Human Services. And then regardless, if a toddler has a one plan or an IEP, depending on how old they are, our local education associations, our LEAs, provide those services. And I'm sure that that's similar to the way it works everywhere. So in Vermont, our IDAC, our Part C providers, have never engaged in any of the SPDIG work. They have their own CSPD and their own SIP to improve social emotional outcomes for infants and toddlers, but there hadn't been any kind of concerted effort to provide training and coaching to those providers until we came along, and that became what we wanted to do with our SPDIG application. So we wanted to create a continuum using our Vermont MTSS, which includes our early MTSS frameworks, and ignore all the writing in the little boxes. I had this slide in a different position before, and then I decided I wanted to put it up here, so then all the little things maybe don't make a lot of sense. But the idea was that we would have this continuum from birth, where there would be consistent systems, training, and coaching that went from that birth to age 3 group of providers to our universal pre-K model. So that's why you did UPK plus, because it's complicated. And it's the same idea of systems, training, and coaching around our MTSS model, and then into the training around providing systems, training, and coaching around high quality instruction and intervention for the elementary plus. And then, so that was the idea, and that's what we've done and how we've divided up our SPDIG. So we have 2 goals in the SPDIG. Goal 1 is what I affectionately call Part B, and that is for Part B, ages 3 through 21. There's a focus on the VTMT, on our MTSS framework, high quality instruction and intervention, and for the children who are 3 and 4 in our public pre-Ks, they're getting the educators are using the pyramid model of practices. And then once teachers are aged for kindergarten and up, they're focusing on high quality instruction and intervention. Even though there's the pyramid model of practices that has the focus on social emotional outcomes, the idea of improving the whole system, that MTSS system, fits right in. So there's no like division between the age of the kid. It's just really the content that they're working on. And then goal 2 is that part C part, which again, it's the same idea and it's using the same pyramid model of practices just for infants and toddlers. And then there's the MTSS systems coaching. For all of the participants in our SPDIG, they're broken up into, as I'm sure everybody's is, where there is, wow, the leadership, there's that leadership team. We have education leaders, the teacher leaders, and as well as educators. And even though between our goal 2 and goal 1, they might be called different things, the idea around the training and the coaching that they're getting is consistent across that continuum. And I'm also stammering because somehow the slides with the notes disappeared. Even though I'm looking at where the notes should be, they're not there. So we're winging it.
Doing great.
Thanks. I did want to show an example of the one of the flyers that we created because this this concept was brand new for our Part C providers and for the state Part C partners. We wanted to explain what it is when we're talking about the Children's Integrated Service, early intervention, why we need this, why we're using the pyramid model of practices, how it creates this through line for from infants and toddlers to pre-kindergarten and then into school age. And so this was just to sort of define for both the state level folks as well as entities interested in being part of a cohort of what we would be providing. So, you know, that we're building capacity. There's a very rich family engagement involved. There's a section on how does it benefit the program. So whether this program is providing early intervention or the Children's Integrated Service part, so it's not focused on the early intervention children with a one plan, what's in it for them? And then how does it benefit the children and staff? And this we found to be very helpful to get buy-in. We've had a lot of success with the standard pre-K providers, both public and private, but going down into the infant and toddler aid stage was a little bit more of an unknown. But this has been very helpful. Right now, we have one region that's participating. We had hoped for more, but with the success that's happened this first year, we will have more members join the cohort 2, and which will just improve the number of these early intervention and Children's Integrated Service providers that we're training, providing the coaching to continue with the work that's been happening for the past several years in our universal pre-K spaces. But it's very new. Oh, and this is the final slide information that's just about me. That's it. Any questions for me? Because I'm happy to answer, go back for all the gobbledygook that was on the other slides.
It wasn't gobbledygook. Any questions? Yeah, it's nice to know, you know, that the one pager has been helpful in communicating and getting interest. I think sometimes people just need to kind of put their hands on something, right? Like, what are you going to do? What's happening?
Yeah, and the SPDIG idea is very very known to our public school LEA areas, even in the pre-K world. Our Agency of Human Service, even though there is that plan for professional learning, really hadn't dabbled in this. And so explaining it, there was just no context to give. So yeah, it's definitely been helpful, and it's taken a year, but that's okay. Like, we're really getting some traction now, which is exciting.
Yeah. The older I get, the more accepting I am of the time it takes to actually, especially when you use different terminology, you've got different statutes in some states, you know, state statutes, not the national or laws. You've got different funding sources sometimes. So yeah. Well, we've had some fantastic presentations today. I'm so glad we have this recorded. Thank you, Kelsey, for everything you did. I think hopefully she doesn't mind me saying, but she is leaving to go get married. So she will be off for a couple weeks and on a honeymoon. She's going to Vietnam. So we will miss her, but we're very glad for her. That's right. Enjoy. Congratulations early. And it's going to be great. And she's promised us a picture of her donut wall from the wedding. So we all look forward to that. If we can't taste it, we can at least see it. So thank you all. Thanks for everyone for staying on the whole time. Thank you for our presenters. It was fantastic information. And I'm just so impressed by the impact folks are having across the nation. And it's really inspiring and uplifting to hear this good news. So have a great afternoon. And possibly we'll see you on the March 15th Fidelity Friday. Thank you. Thanks, Jocelyn. Bye.